We are a nonprofit organization whose mission is to empower, support, educate about, and advocate for persons on the autism spectrum and their families. The format today is a brief overview of the topic followed by a question and answer session. We're privileged to have on our panel today an adult with Asperger's syndrome and some professionals who work in the area, and parents. So I'll let them introduce themselves. Would you like to start?
I'm Bridget. I'm a transition facilitator with the Transition Independence Program for Southeast Human Services.
My name is John Cody. I have Asperger's syndrome, and I'm going to give you that perspective, a very first-person perspective of that. And I'm a videographer. I'm also a public speaker, and I'm happy to be here today.
My name is, Delray Williams. My son is on the Asperger, on the autism spectrum. He was diagnosed, I think, when he was 5, which was not even a discussed thing in the community or anywhere. There was no books, nothing. We learned there. And he's now 21. He's a junior in college right now and doing really well.
I'm Sylvia Gray. I work for the Fargo Public Schools, and I work with teams of teachers and students that have autism, and trying to help with strategies and ideas to make them more successful in the school setting.
Thank you. Our presenter today is Margie Gray. She is
Employment Services Manager for Specialist
Midwest. And she has a unique view of our young people as they're ready to enter the job market. And so we're really glad that she's able to continue our discussion from last time about promoting independence. And thank you for coming.
Not a problem. So we work with adults on the autism spectrum. We are an employer. We are not a service agency. We recruit, assess, train, and hire adults on the autism spectrum for detail-oriented jobs. Generally speaking, those are the types of things that we find that our folks are really adept in and successful in those types of jobs. So what I'd like to do is I'm gonna cover a couple of things that we really just didn't have time to get to the last time. I'm going to give you a couple of, just sort of a laundry list of these are the kinds of things that we're working with as folks come to us in the assessment and training process. And then I'm going to hand it over to the panel, and I'm hoping that they can bring some of their experiences in terms of these are the kinds of things that we find, you know, it would really be helpful if these types of things are worked on from early on all the way through so that our folks are ready for that transition and are set up for success in terms of having independence at whatever level is going to be appropriate for that individual. So the things that we talked about last time were problem solving, self-awareness, both physical and emotional self-awareness, the many me's, that I can still be me and behave differently in different environments, and that doesn't mean I'm being a hypocrite or being censored in a negative way. Accommodation, the fact that that's a two-way street, that even though we get accommodated in schools and in the workforce, that the accommodation has to come from both sides, both directions, for it to be truly successful. Perspective taking, the idea of being able to understand that another person may not be thinking what I'm thinking, and that what I do has an impact on the people around me. And then today I wanted to sort of just wrap all of that up with taking it all in, which is pretty broad in terms of a topic, and self-advocacy. So taking it all in, you know, the goals of being able to take in information and interpret it, the goals that we would have are, you know, one of the big things that our folks struggle with are the unwritten rules. So, you know, and that's everything from dress code to what are appropriate topics of conversation. Is it okay to bring food to your desk or not? I mean, there are all kinds of, some of those rules may be written, but they are very frequently unwritten rules that you just have to learn by paying attention. And the biggest goal that results from that is just the ability to manage being in a workplace. So that can be really tricky, because if I don't know the rules and I'm constantly in a state of anxiety about, am I doing something wrong? It's going to make it hard for me to go there day after day after day and work any kind of, that's just not a sustainable situation in being able to be a consistent worker. So some of the ways that we talk about how do we develop the skill of taking it all in? Because our folks have a tendency to focus on those minute details and will sometimes miss the big picture of what that all means. Being able to interpret things in a contextually appropriate way. So, you know, we started out in my house when my son was very young. Oh, and I have a 12-year-old son who's on the spectrum in addition to working with adults. So I sort of do it 24/7, which some days I question the wisdom of that strategy, but I learn a lot. But one of the things that we did early on was we talked about being a detective, and I think that applies in a lot of different situations. So we can be a detective when it comes to identifying what's going on for us physically. You know, as I'm starting to get frustrated, what's happening? How can I recognize that early enough so that I can prevent a meltdown or prevent getting to my breaking point? And that's something that's really important for adults as well. I mean, I see it with the folks that I work with. I'll start to see something and I'll say, hey, so how are things going? How are things going here? How are things going personally? And inevitably, if I've started to pick up on something, there is something that's a nagging issue in the background. And it's important, the more they're able to recognize that, the more effective they're going to be able to be in the workplace. Taking it all in, being a detective and taking it all in, paying attention to, what do people wear in our office? Does the boss wear the same thing that the rest of the people wear? One of our big conversations is, who are your coworkers? Who are your colleagues? That's the word that we use. So who are your colleagues? And inevitably, it'll be, oh, well, you know, it's the person that sits next to me, it's my boss, and my boss loves fielding this conversation because he's like, oh, no. I am not your colleague. I'm your boss. There's a difference in our relationship. Colleagues are those people who are on an equal level within the organization. So there are those kinds of social nuances that are really important to be a detective and to recognize those, because those are the things that can really get you in trouble in the workplace if you're not aware of them. You know, from an early age, we'll notice and discuss the specifics of different environments. You know, what's different about school versus home versus being outside playing with your friends. The same thing applies to adults. What are the differences? What are the differences in terms of the way we interact? What are the differences in what's appropriate and what's not? and having those conversations on a frequent basis. You know, as something comes up, and I love using movies, because there are so many examples in movies of, okay, how did this person, you know, why did this all go wrong? And talking about it and understanding the differences that were part of the unwritten rules that someone didn't pick up on or didn't follow. And I think that it's really important to have a trusted advisor. So in our workplace, even when I place someone in an organization, in another business, I may still be their main point of contact, or our life skills supervisor will still be a primary point of contact. That's a trusted advisor. You know, some of our folks, I have one guy who, he talks to his dad a lot. And if something comes up, he'll talk to his dad before he'll talk to me. And that's okay. It's important to have that trusted advisor who can really help understand the things that they're not seeing. So, and then the one other thing that we talked about last week that I think is a great strategy is externalizing our internal conversation. And this is something that can work really well starting out with kids. So talking about, wow, that guy, he really seems upset and he doesn't seem to be handling it in a very appropriate way. You know, I wonder, you know, if he were able to take a deep breath and calm himself and explain why he's upset, the other person might be able to help him with that a little bit better. So having those kinds of externalized conversations, the things that we do in our head quite naturally, but that thought process may not be a natural thought process for my son. So by externalizing it, we're able to have that conversation, and he learns more about those interactions and how to be more effective in those interactions. So the final topic that I really felt like was important for us to be developing with our kids and young adults is self-advocacy. And you know, the goals with self-advocacy are, number one, appropriate communication. So advocating so that I don't get to the point where my frustration level means that I can't communicate appropriately. When we're able to self-advocate, it can reduce stress and anxiety. So if I'm able to address things as they come up, they don't become big issues for me to be stressed out and have to deal with on a daily, even if it's something that's not a big deal. If it's something that is causing me stress day after day after day, eventually I can't deal with it anymore. Eventually, the little deal is a big deal. Advocating, in my mind, and this is my personal opinion, I think it increases flexibility. I've seen it with my son, that when he knows he's got an outlet, he knows he has a way of addressing things, then he's able to be more flexible because because his anxiety level isn't as high. It sort of all rolls together, and in a way it helps to increase the capacity for flexibility and for his ability to do things differently to reduce his anxiety and his stress. It definitely builds confidence and competency, because I've seen this happen, as my son advocates for himself, he becomes more confident. He's clear about who he is and what he needs to be successful. And I see it with the folks that I work with, that as they're able to express themselves more clearly, as they're able to communicate more effectively with me, they become more confident in their work and in their interactions with the folks around them. And so ultimately, that's going to increase independence and their capacity for work. So how do we work on self-advocacy? I can tell you that it's worked on from the time kids are in grade school. From the first time you hear someone say, use your words, tell me what's going on with you. We're working on self-advocacy. And so I think that this is one of the things that we do work on from a very early age. You know, we can model self-advocacy. We can role play self-advocacy. Okay, so you had a meltdown. What was it that led up to the meltdown? Okay, so what could you have done? What could you have done before you got to that point where you couldn't talk anymore, where you couldn't use your words anymore? And the way we see this in the workplace is people who will just up and quit. It's like something's been miserable for them for however many days, weeks, or months, and they just get to a point where they're like, okay, I quit, rather than, and I've heard examples of adults that have been in this situation, and it's one of the things that we're very focused on in making sure that folks are in a good fit for the type of work that they're doing. I think that movies, again, are a great way to be able to use examples. You know, when someone appropriately advocated for themselves, but also when they don't do it appropriately. What could they have done differently? Brainstorming. And that helps to increase flexible thinking as well. So you're working on multiple skills as you work on that. And then the thing that I think is really important, and I caught myself doing this with my son, is noticing when they advocate appropriately. And I don't remember what the situation was, but my son kept telling me something. And I was like, okay, okay. And I didn't do anything about it. And I'm like, you know, it took sort of something hitting me between the eyes before I was like, oh my gosh, he's advocating for himself. This is what we talked to him about. This is what we've been hoping for. He's doing it, and I'm not responding appropriately. I'm not reinforcing the behavior, but also taking into account what he's telling me. He's telling me what's not working for him. So I need to make sure that I recognize those, acknowledge them, and respond appropriately. Because we can really undermine all the work that we've done if we don't. And sometimes, I gotta tell you, sometimes it's easy to tune out if you're working with someone who has just a constant stream of words coming out of their mouth, right? Which can happen. It's easy to tune it out sometimes. So it's really important to be able to take a step back, take a deep breath, clear your own head, to be able to, and guess what you're doing? You're modeling appropriate behavior when you do that, right? So those are the things that I think are really important that we're working on from a general perspective as we're preparing our kids and our young adults to be independent, or as independent as they can be. So I thought maybe it would be helpful just to give you some examples of, these are the kind of things that we work on when we start an assessment and training process. We work on appropriate language and talking about really, well, I have one person who really had an issue with this, and he said, you know, you're censoring me. I need to say what I need to say, and if this is the way I express myself, it's the way I express myself. And I said, okay. And it was we were specifically talking about a written communication, and I said, okay, I get that. I said, so write it all down. And I said, and then go back and edit it, and use language that the other person is going to be able to hear your message. Because if you use certain language, they're going to shut down. Just like you shut down if I do certain things that push your buttons, they're going to shut down. And so we really talked through how do you work with that? Because this is a guy who wants to do big things, and he can do big things. But it's working through those specific things that are getting in his way. We talk about food and drink and where and when it's appropriate to have food and drink. We talk about bodily functions because it has been an issue in every group that we've had. Just, well, that's who I am, I need to do that. Well, there are different ways to do it that can be more appropriate than others, okay? Belching and, farting in a group of people is not necessarily the way to make friends. We talk about sarcasm and humor is in the eye of the beholder. We talk about appropriate topics of conversation. Frustration, how to deal with frustration, appropriate dress, what's appropriate to wear at work. We talk about when to ask for help. I have some people who every time the slightest thing comes up for them, it comes out their mouth, and they're actually thinking it through verbally, but it sounds like they're asking for help. And then I have other people who won't ask for help at all and will just go down a path that they have no clue if they're on the right path or not. And they may waste a half an hour or more because they don't speak up and ask a question. So we talk about balancing appropriate questions, making sure that you're on the right track. And then we talk about responsibility for attitude, that you're responsible for contributing to the environment in the office. And if you come in and you're always negative, then you're contributing to a negative environment. And if you are at least neutral, you're not contributing to the negativity. So it can be a more pleasant work environment for everyone. There are a few things that come up in the interview process that, and some of these I don't know how you work with. So I think this is going to be a great place to start the discussion, but one of the things that comes up is, do they want to work? I know that as a parent, I want my son to work someday. I'm not 100% sure how to foster that. I sort of figure that if I'm always talking negatively about having to go to work and not liking my job and all those kind of things, which is not what I talk about, just to be clear, because I have a great job, then I think that might contribute to a negative perspective to having a job. But that internal will to work, the desire to be independent, the desire to, contribute to society. I don't have any easy answers on that, but I do know that if somebody comes to me and they really don't have any desire to work, they're not going to be at the top of my list because I don't know what's going to sustain them. If I've got people that I know want to work, really want to work, those are the ones that are going to have my eye before the others. Not that I don't consider the others. Flexibility in what they are able and willing to do. So one of the things that comes up a lot in interviews is that our folks have no idea what they want to do. I mean, and I can't even tell you how often this comes up. There's very little professional experience, even among folks that are older that come to interview with us. And what I can tell you is that work experience is work experience. Volunteer, paid, whatever. It's important to have that experience, but it's also important to talk about what skills might be good for different types of jobs. And to be able to say, the fact that I love to play video games does not necessarily mean that I'm going to be good at designing video games, because there are these skills that go along with it. And if you really want to do that, then maybe it's important for us to focus on these skills, or at least see if you have an aptitude for those skills. To give them a sense of direction and to be able to say, okay, you're really good at this, that skill is also part of this job. That generalization of skills is not something that I see very often when I'm talking to folks. And then the one last thing, I had one of those wonderful moments with my son where it just warmed my heart, and you know, you think, oh, yes, we're working with great educators, and he's getting it. We were talking about a task that he needed to do for school, and I said, you know, I'm really proud of you for pushing through and accomplishing that task, because I know you don't like doing that. And I'm so proud of you for doing that, because that's a skill that's going to be really important for you in life as you get older. And he said, yeah, because every job is going to have something that you don't like doing. And I was like, oh, thank you, yes. So I think that's an important thing to really instill, because there are going to be those things that, and some of our folks have very low frustration tolerance. They don't have the ability to push through those things. So as hard as it is for me to see his teachers pushing him at times beyond what I think he's capable of, it has paid dividends already at 12. He's already learning those lessons. And he's developing that stamina for being able to tolerate things that he doesn't necessarily love doing. So I was wondering if I could ask Bridget. So Bridget works with, well, why don't you tell them? Bridget and I work with some of the same people, so we talk a lot.
I work with youth 14 to 24 years of age, working on achieving goals related to independence. So very broad, can be a lot: education, employment, living on their own, budgeting, just kind of all of those daily living skills necessary to be independent.
So could you tell us some of the, are there like a few key things that you see on a regular basis that you think, oh, you know, if this had really been a focus earlier on, either in education or at home or somewhere along the line, this could be better right now?
I think a lot of what I work on with individuals, we call it in vivo teaching. So a lot of it is working together. So an example, scheduling appointments. A youth might not know how to schedule their own appointment, maybe not even know what number to call. So the first time we'll call together, I'll do the conversation, they're sitting there with me. The second time, then I'll still be sitting there with them, but then they're initiating the call. Usually it's on speakerphone, so that if they're struggling, I can help facilitate that conversation. We do a lot of role playing for new situations. I'm trying to think. It's so broad. I do so many different things every day. I guess this morning I have a youth that just started a new job, and she's still doing orientation, but then doing some floor work too. And she was feeling frustrated today because orientation is kind of telling her to do it one way, but when she gets to the floor, she's doing it a different way. So she's like, they're telling me that I can do it whatever way I want. And so she was confused. And so we talked about how can she be more clear about how she's supposed to do something. Having that conversation with her supervisor with orientation. I praised her because she had she had great insight. Well, sometimes I just get snappy, is what she had said. She's like, I think I'm going to have this person help me talk to my supervisor or whatever. So it's a lot of, we do a lot of that in vivo teaching, you know, working together until they're comfortable being able to do it on their own. I don't know that I really answered your question.
No, I mean, those are certainly a couple of situations that, and I think that the method that you're talking about, it's sort of a scaffolding kind of process. So not expecting them to take it on all at once, but doing it one step at a time so that there's not that massive stress over, you're telling me I need to go and make a doctor's appointment and sending me out of your office. That would be really overwhelming.
And lots of times it takes multiple times before they feel comfortable doing it on their own. Even attending, and I just think too, like, you know, Margie was saying, independence starts really young. Like right now, my 7-year-old, when we go to the doctor and they ask you all the beginning questions, your age, your birth date, I'm having her do that already. You know, when we're in the doctor's office and they say, why are you here? There's a complaint. She's telling them. You know, I'm there supporting her, she's comfortable with me, but, you know, allowing them to explain their feelings, or it's that self-advocacy. It really does start at an early age.
John, do you have something you'd like to add, just in terms of maybe a key thing that you learned that has helped you in terms of being independent, being successful?
Well, a lot of stuff does speak to me, and a lot of it definitely does come to recognizing kind of what is stress points and seeing those early on so you can tackle those before they kind of start to snowball. And like she was saying, you know, just starting with someone else helping you do something and then eventually being able to do it on your own, and just kind of taking steps like that, one step at a time. And you know, sometimes things do get overwhelming, and sometimes in those cases I'm going to need a little bit of extra help, but I try to push myself to do things as independently as possible. And that's it for now, but
Okay.
I'll probably think of some more stuff and I'll be able to answer questions.
Sure. What do you think? And you've got a 21-year-old. I sit in awe and admiration right now. He's in college. He's doing well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
But you know, I didn't think so when he was 12. You know, just say FYI. You know, that was a tough age. I think that a lot of things resonated really well with what you talked about, was having them do it, not doing it for them. You know, and so with excuse me, with my son, we spent a lot of time role playing, which I hate role playing personally. But it would be, so I would say, here's what's going to happen, but I'm expecting that you will do it, not me. And and what they'll ask will be whatever. I'll kind of give them sort of a clue. They'll ask you about this, and then you'll say, well, what should I say? Well, if I were you, I would say, and I would give them, I would give them my words. But I said, you can do however you think about it. And then he might want to practice it, or not, or he just goes through parts of it. And we still, to a certain degree, do that now. You know, it'll be different kinds of things. It'll be like, well, one thing, when he was in 9th grade, he wanted to start a gaming club. Okay, so he by this time we had gotten, he became really good at being a good friend. So he had a lot of friends. We really worked hard to get to that point. So in 9th grade, he decided we wanted to have a gaming club. And so I said, well, how would we do that? And I think it was actually Minecraft. That's what he really wanted to do. And I said, well, okay, here would be what I would do process-wise. And then, so he would do pieces of it down to, they went to school board to get it okayed. I think it really was Minecraft class, and superintendent school decided gaming would be the thing. She didn't know gaming meant gambling at the time. Whatever, it does what they need to, but it was flexible. So I flash forward now, and he's an engineering degree, and his dad is an engineer, and clearly on the spectrum too. We recognize that, but it's fine. And so they have, as engineers, you have a stainless steel pink room, of which Sam has always been aware of. His dad had one. And so it's called the Order of the Engineers. So when you get your degree, you get that pinky ring, right? Well, Winona does not have that. And so he is now taking that piece. He's working to get an Order of Engineering at Winona. And I was just sort of like, oh my gosh, that is so cool. But for me, it's the taking pieces of it, walking them through, and he still does it. Because I know my ideal is that I'm not there. And I'm not there. He chose not to go to NDSU. Surprise, surprise. And it's sort of cool, but so he needs to know the things when he's there. Not me helping him, although he can always text me, he does.
So from an education perspective, what do you see as being the things that...
You know, it makes it difficult because in school our expectations are learning and we want kids to achieve success academically. And so you're kind of taking two different situations and blending them. And we tend to have a lot of people working in our buildings who don't have the knowledge that we are coming from. It's a lot of work to teach strategies and ideas to people who may look at autism and see behavior in a way that's viewed as in a negative light rather than behavior as language, and they're trying to tell us something. So there's a lot of complex situations during the day that we have to work through, and you hope that your child has a team of teachers and paraprofessionals that will work with you and listen to you, because you are all the advocates for your child. You know that child better than anyone. And I think we have to take those ideas and blend them together. And sometimes that's a challenge, I have to be honest. And so even thinking of taking things one step at a time. In school, we have so many academic things to get through in a day. We don't oftentimes have time for one step at a time kind of thinking. And because of that, when we push kids, then we create a time when there's behaviors. And how do we handle those behaviors? That's the question. So this is a really, really great topic to think about because it is our end result, but we get so caught up in our day that we forget that really what we want is independence at the end of the road.
Well, and I think that, you know, my son's in 6th grade, which is middle school, and the thing that we heard from the very beginning, they've got to be a lot more independent. They've got to, they've got to be responsible. We're teaching responsibility. And, I'll be honest, I had red flags going up all over the place. The way it's been done, though, in our school has been so supportive and has really supported the development of organization. I mean, that's an important independence skill. You have to be organized enough to be able to have what you need when you get to work or when you get to your doctor's appointment or to be able to make your doctor's appointment or to fill out an application for a job. All of those things take organization, and I see the schools as supporting that in a really, in our case, it has been really very clearly supported to develop that skill. And I think that that's something, it's something we work on very hard at home. If we don't have that partnership with the school, he did slip through the cracks. He decided this year he didn't want to have a para. That he was fine, he didn't need a para, he didn't need one last year in his mind. He didn't need it for sitting at his desk and getting his work done, but the organization piece wasn't there. But we've worked really closely with the school, partnering to make sure that they knew what was going on, that the teachers really had a clear understanding. It's not that he's refusing to do it. It's that he didn't have any idea when he was supposed to do it. And so, working together on that. Joanne, were you?
I was just wondering if somebody could walk us through, how do you help a child with no clue about organizing take those steps toward it? How do you do that?
You know, one thing that I really recommend is to use any type of visual support. If there's anything visually we can do, whether it's words or pictures, something to help the process so it's not just talking, but hopefully helping them using different systems. And I don't know, maybe some of you have some ideas too of what works for your child.
Well, we do have a sign on our door that says lunchbox, that's for the little one, and mouse, because he has to remember to take his own personal mouse to use with his tablet at school. And it started out, we're doing this for 2 weeks now. It started out, did you remember your mouse? Did you remember your mouse? Look at the door. And then it became, did you check the door yet? The list. And this morning I said, have you remembered your important things today? He said, yeah. And I said, well, what were they? My mouse. And so what I liked about that was that, you know, we started out telling him what, and then what's nice with the visual is that it's not me nagging him. It's the list, which helps a lot. But he gradually was taking that on himself, and he still needed a reminder to look. But then on his own today, he did it without being reminded. But I spot checked him. So it went a lot faster than I thought, actually.
When I was in middle school, we did have, you would have like an organizer or planner which you would write down what you need to get done and what's going to happen on a monthly calendar. And I would also use that to write down things I would need to do in an order throughout a day, and then use that as like an aid to remind me what needs to happen in what order. So that's a visual way of doing it as well, and then actually, you know, physically writing it will reinforce that, and then putting down like a little notation of the time that's supposed to happen. And so you do have that visual aid there of actually writing it and then seeing it. And then, like you said, you know, if you need to, you can have at home some notes around the house of what needs to get done. So you can do that. I also, in elementary school, did have one-on-one help with learning more social skills too. And all those things just kind of do eventually add up to really help you to become more independent.
Do you have things you use now in your daily life to kind of remind you, either a planner or your phone or something like that?
A calendar that I'll write stuff down in, but mostly though I'm kind of remembering on my own right now.
Our school
What is
district,
this too? I like that.
our school
That's
district
good.
is getting ready to go to all electronic planners. And I was bummed that they didn't do it this year, because I thought that that would be a better tool for him. I just really see him relating to electronics in a much better way
That's
than
what my
paper.
son does now, in the same way.
And I
Puts
don't-
everything in it.
I have a 12-year-old and just started middle school as well this year, and I will look forward to the day when it is electronic, because he struggles so much with papers.
Yeah.
Keeping track of papers, I mean, and his school bag just like gradually gets heavier and heavier until somebody tells him to clean it out. Because he just puts everything in there and it just grows forever and doesn't, I don't know, his biggest challenge is that executive functioning stuff.
Mhm.
And we've tried morning routine to put a sign on the mirror in the bathroom, and these are the things, and he gets mad because he wants his independence. He doesn't want these things showing up all over the place that make him look different. So, and he's very vocal about how I'll learn from my mistakes, and which is great, and we talk about that a lot, but sometimes it's hard as a parent to see him do those mistakes over and over again and want to be able to help him, but he doesn't want the help. And he's the one that would never ask a question. Like, he would get himself into something and not ask the question. So we've done really good partnering with the school. He has an amazing team this year, and I was scared to death of him entering middle school.
We're on the same page there. Yeah.
And he has done amazing. And he did not want para support either, so we had to really kind of coach the paras to make it look like they were just there for the room. And now he has 2 paras that he will approach in the hallway, and that's, I mean, I told them at the school, I'm like, kudos to his paras, because he wanted nothing to do with him. And so I do feel like the school system does do a good job, but it has to be, you have to be that advocate right there on every step of the way.
Yeah, you know, you brought up something that I think is really important, and that is that some of the things that we're talking about, I think I know for my son, I can't teach him certain things. He doesn't want to learn them from me. And having teachers that are partnering with you, as well as coaches, my son's sort of atypical athlete because he's very athletic, never met a sport he didn't love. And so we work with the coaches sometimes too, where if he's really stuck, I'll talk to his coach and I'll say, you know, is there any way you could talk to him about this? I'm on email with his teachers on a regular basis. If something comes up, I let them know. And a lot of times he's so much more receptive to them. He'll come home and he'll say, yeah, Mrs. Wilson told me, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, wow, she sounds like a really smart woman. And
I told her that.
No, I told him that.
I'd just like to say that you did bring up 2 important points, which I do want to kind of reverberate, and that is, A, he said himself that he wants his independence. That's a huge step forward, because that does show that he does have a goal in the end. And I was the same way. I wanted independence as well. But, you know, it is important to get help to reach that point so you can be independent. But that is a goal that he is showing, and that's a great sign. The second thing I wanted to say is how you said that he, you know, like the para supports, kind of pretend like they're not being there. That is kind of that self-awareness, you know, realizing that you are a little different with Asperger's. And when I was in school, there was always this big stigma with Asperger's or autism, and you don't want other people to find out, because that's a very scary thing. I think that's a really good solution, that you do have healthy do with paras, but they're kind of, you know, they're not obvious to other people as being paras. I think that's probably a pretty smart thing to do for the time being. Any other questions?
Thoughts, ideas?
Actually, I guess I have another question. So how do you, my son can be very, last week he was going to the school board to tell them that Latin is not needed anymore in life. And how do you foster that willingness to step out like that and still, like, I had a hard time. I was like, you're not going to win that battle. But I was excited about the fact that he wanted to, you know, he knew where he wanted to go with this battle. So I don't know, and that feels like, I mean, that's a skill that he'll need in the workforce. He'll need to be able to speak up about those things. But how do you teach them the appropriate ways to handle that? Or, like, I don't know, if anybody's got any.
Yeah, if that was my son, because he's done variations of that. What I've done is, I said, well, let's talk about that. And so I make him walk through all the reasons, and then I'll bring up all the reasons that might be different from that. And then he has shifted when it is something that probably wouldn't go over as well. But on the other hand, you know, I make sure that there's other moments, you know, so we've done some, when kids were younger, I always took them to a lot of things I did. They just came with me. So when he discovered homelessness, for instance, that became a really big deal. He wanted to learn more, and so we did. And then he wanted to put together a flyer and then take it to the neighbors and then take it to church. I fully said, sure, you know, so there'll be times that you can say, yeah, and then times that you can sort of guide him. But, you know, maybe if he did something that didn't work out perfectly, how bad is that really?
Right.
You know, then he also learns that some things don't always work. My daughter always reminds me about when she had a teacher she swore hated her. And I said, and another teacher, it's so weird when other teachers say, I don't do that, teacher, but whatever. Said, well, you could test out, you don't need to take that class because you're really smart. And it was her fortes, okay? And I said, nah. And she was not happy with me on that. At 23, she still brings it up occasionally. And I said, I'm still right on that one. Because you're in life going to find people that you perceive as not getting along with you for whatever reason. And that's just how it works.
Yeah.
And now you have an experience.
We have that discussion a lot about this is the way life works, and sometimes you're going to have to do this, like what you brought up. Sometimes you're going to have to do those things that you don't like to do.
I think we're
with
tempted
people
to
that
protect
you're
them
not. Yeah.
for everything.
Important life skills. It's, I said it last time, and I'll say it again because I find myself falling into the trap from time to time. There are times when I want to make things better for him in a way that ultimately may not serve him. I've been very involved with the school, and there are times when I take a step back and I take a deep breath and I trust that they know him and they won't let him dig himself into too deep of a hole. But I'm watching to see how much dirt's coming out to, along the way. And I think that it's important to let him, look at a report card and see an F on it because he didn't turn anything in. And, and in 6th grade, he can still turn it all in. So it's like, it's not a big deal, right? But he knows what it's like to look at that and say, oh, wow. And to know that he can fix it. Because he's a perfectionist, the idea that if it's not perfect, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing.
Another thing too I was thinking about, in some ways you could almost twist that a little bit in a different direction and even say, you have some valid points. Let's write some of these concerns out. Let's see if you could maybe meet with someone in your building to talk about it. Maybe it could be an English teacher. Maybe he's going to be a future debater and he could learn, how to debate, could become a politician. I mean, again, if he's interested in going in front of people and presenting his ideas, that's a positive. I mean, that's fabulous. He might be able to go someplace with those skills. So really, you kind of want to encourage him too to be willing to share that, because maybe other kids in the class feel the same way. So, again, a positive and a negative kind of together.
Sure.
You have to look at that maybe in a little different way.
And then to build onto that also, again, I do agree. It'd be, what's the worst thing that could happen if he does go in front and debates the value of a Latin class? What I would say is you should teach him the formal ways of doing it, the written format, doing it in a language that is appropriate, like you were saying with censoring or not censoring, making sure you're doing it professionally, in a professional format, in a formal format, and then bringing it forward. If he loses the case, he learns some skills about how to do it in a very professional, formal way. If he happens to win the case, yeah, he learns.
He made a lot of friends.
Yeah.
That's
So-
great, though, because
so
I'm
what-
sure this will come up again.
So what is the worst thing that could happen if he learns a few skills?
Right, yeah, thank you.
My
Well, I
son's
think-
was chewing gum. Chewing gum should be allowed in school because there's research about chewing gum and how well you do in classes. So he thought chewing gum. And so where I channeled him is he had a paper and he wrote a piece on it. I know, done.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great.
Well, I think we are about out of time at this point, and I think they use this room at 1:30 for something else. So we'd be happy to continue one-on-one conversations if anybody would like to chat afterward. But thank you for coming today and participating. We appreciate it, and thanks to the panel. Really.